Hey, it's Derek from WatchMeCode.net. Have you ever thought about your absolute favorite thing to do as a software developer? I know there's honestly quite a few things that I do love about this job. Everything from solving problems to some of the really great people that I get to work with to some of the industries that I've been able to help solve problems and just provide solutions for in general. But there's one particular thing that every time I do this, it's the most satisfying thing in the world. Just absolutely, without a doubt, my favorite thing to do. And I'll tell you about that in a moment, but first, I have a little story for you. So a few days ago, actually I take that back, a few weeks, maybe a month ago, I was working on some software for a client, and I had this incredibly complex set of interactions between the browser and the server. Not user interactions, but round trips to the server between the browser and the server in order to get just the right amount of data in just the right place at the right time. It was far more work than I wanted it to be in order to get the job done. But I was kind of sort of hamstrung a little bit. I had to make all of these calls back to the server because the format in which the data was already set up to respond with wasn't quite what I needed on the client side. So because of that, multiple calls, several chunks of code in some kind of strange places to get things working right. And it worked. I got it done. It was working perfectly fine. It was working fast enough for local area network development and deployment that I was going to be doing. Not a big deal. It wasn't going live on the internet or anything. But then a few days ago, I was talking with the backend developer, the database developer in the large data warehouse system that I'm dealing with in this application. And I expressed some concern about the way that I was having to go do all of this. And he's like, oh yeah, we can totally help. The stored procedures that you're using are dedicated to that part of the application anyways. It's not a big deal to change them. So he goes in and makes a few changes and gives me all of the data that I needed with one single call, which was great. I didn't have to do this crazy complex round of calling the server over and over again to get the data that I needed anymore. And it comes down to the point where I think I have everything in place, and I think that it's working with the new code, the new stored procedures that he had written versus the old cruddy way that I was doing things previously. And the ultimate test in this case was to just go in there and delete the old code. So I did. Opened up my editor, opened up the files, went in there, deleted the old code that did things the old way, and everything still worked. And I was incredibly happy. I mean, not like jumping up in joy, yeah, kind of happy, but still happy, It was a relief to have this old, crusty, cruddy, awful process gone from the application. And what I've realized over the last few years is that this situation is a perfect kind of illustration for what my personal favorite thing to do in software development is. And that is to delete code. I absolutely love deleting code. It is far more satisfying to delete old code that I don't need anymore, things that didn't work, things that shouldn't be there. I get far more pleasure out of doing that than I do out of actually solving the solution, solving the problem some of the times. It's kind of weird, but it's true. I just really, really, really enjoy deleting code for a lot of reasons. But I'm not the only person that really enjoys this either. I was talking on Twitter with Jim Holmes, and he was saying how he likes to delete code as well. And I asked him very specifically why he likes deleting code so much. And he responded by saying it allows him to cut complexity, cut dependencies, cut poor value that shouldn't have been added in the first place, and ultimately cut maintenance costs. And those are 4 very big reasons for why I love to delete code as well. For me, especially, cutting the maintenance cost is an incredibly important aspect of this. Every line of code that I delete means I have one less line of code to maintain. Every line of code that I don't have to maintain is one less cognitive load that I have to deal with when looking at the application. Every time I can reduce the cognitive load of looking at the code, well, it just makes the application easier. It makes it easier for me to focus on the things that are important. It makes it easier for me to focus on what should be there. It makes it sometimes easier for me to see where the other problems are that had been hiding in the application because I was dealing with all of this other mental overhead. There are so many benefits to deleting code. There are so many things that I love about deleting code. Cutting complexity, of course, is important. If you have a very complex part of your application with a whole lot of difficulties in your situation, see what you can do to simplify that. In that story that I just told you, updating a stored procedure was all it took, and then my code was suddenly significantly easier. There have been other places where complex amounts of code have been extracted into simple libraries. Putting that simple library back into the main application allowed me to reduce the complexity of the overall application. Cut dependencies as well. If you have a very complex piece of software, chances are you have a high number of dependencies in there. Not always, but there's a pretty high correlation there oftentimes. If you can delete code, you are reducing the amount of code that you depend on in that particular area of the application. Cutting dependencies ultimately reduces the maintenance cost as well by making it easier to deal with that area of the application and not having to worry about all the things that depend on it or all the things that it depends on. Removing things that shouldn't have been in the application in the first place is also incredibly freeing. If you can take a feature that was requested but is never used and delete it, well, there's something that you no longer have to maintain. There's value that you have added to the system by removing a feature. By getting rid of something that shouldn't be there, you're letting the users focus. You're letting you as a developer and as your team focus. You're letting everybody in the organization focus on what should be there instead of being distracted by what should not be there. Ultimately, all this comes down to maintainability and the ability to focus, write good code, and move your system forward. So for me, and for Jim Holmes, I think, my absolute favorite thing to do in software is not solving the problems. It's actually deleting code. I love deleting code. What are your favorite things to do, though? I'd love to hear your response. So right there in the comments down below, give me a reply. Let me know what your favorite thing to do in software development is. And don't forget to hit that like button and also subscribe to the channel so you can keep getting more Thoughts on Code from WatchMeCode.net. Thanks. Bye.